So, who do you say that I am? It's not just a question that Jesus asks of his disciples, it's a question that we ask. We ask it of our family, our friends, colleagues, our parishioners, and even complete strangers. And it's a question that we ask ourselves, or at least we should if we want to have any self-awareness. Who am I? And is there one right answer? When we name someone or label ourselves, are we ever helping ourselves realize an immutable truth? I mean, we may get someone's name or title right, yet remain clueless about what that means for us and for our future. Now, I had no idea what my name meant growing up. And actually, I used to not like my name very much. I was the only Neil I knew. And the other kids in school, twisted it into all kinds of teeming rhymes. And I mostly remember being called things other than my name. Fat lips, as well as ruder and more racist variations of it, was one of the most memorable and, of course, least favorite names I was called. And it wasn't until I was in my late teens that a German girl told me that I had sexier lips than Mick Jagger. And then I finally got over the trauma of that. I was called wimpy, sensitive, and yes, even the three-letter F word. And all of these names shaped my self-perception and my behaviors as well. But none of them ultimately informed me who I would become, because those who called me those names had no clue, and even I didn't know who I was for decades. I paid too much attention to the names that others gave me, and I neglected to listen to that still, small, divine voice calling me into my full self. My name, Neil, is evidently Gaelic in origin, and it means passionate or champion. I like that. I wonder how I might have viewed myself in adolescence had I known the real meaning of my name. Would I have been bolder or more confident? But then perhaps my less than perfect self-image as a child gave me the tools and the drive to achieve, to prove those kids wrong. And perhaps the sensitivity to empathize and have a passion for the underdog. And ironically, the ability to live into the meaning of my name and the priestly calling of which I was then ignorant. So names can be powerful. People are named and not named right and left in today's readings. In Exodus, the new king that arose in Egypt remained nameless, which in itself was a powerful statement. I mean, he was only defined by his ignorance of Joseph, who had saved Egypt generations before, and by his paranoid, brutal, and murderous counterproductive behavior. Imagine what a slam that was to his memory. And yet, in the same reading, we're told that two lowly midwives, Hebrew slaves no less, Shipra, meaning brightness, and Pua, meaning splendid, had their names recorded for the millennia because of their faithfulness and bravery and their disobedient cunning. The Levite parents of our future protagonist remained nameless, but they called their boy a fine child. More accurately translated, he is good. It mimicked the phrase used by God in the creation story, when God looked down on each day in creation and proclaimed, "It is good." And after their child was rescued from the Nile by Pharaoh's daughter, also unnamed, she bestowed the name of Moses upon him, a name that played with both Egyptian and Hebrew meanings, from the water and son. Now, Matthew in the gospel today names almost everything and everyone. He begins by naming the city where they were, Caesarea Philippi, because it had historical, political, and theological meaning. It was named for Caesar Augustus by Philip the Tetrarch, son of Herod the Great, and it lay 35 miles north of the Galilee, halfway on the road to Damascus. And this was Gentile territory, no question about it. And it was also famous for a slew of pagan temples that occupied the cliffs above the city. And below the cliffs was a cave that tradition held was a gateway to the underworld. So imagine how powerful it was that Jesus asked his disciples in this rather auspicious location the question, who do people say that the Son of Man is? Who do people say the Son of Man is? He didn't say, who do our people say the Son of Man is? Because after all, even Gentiles had been flocking to listen to and be healed by Jesus. And of course, the disciples responded with a slew of names of Jewish historical figures, oblivious to the fact that Jesus had been preaching to and healing Jews and Gentiles alike. And then when Jesus asked them, but who do you say that I am? Simon Peter blurts out, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Pretty good. And Jesus answers him, well, blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven. Son of Jonah. You see, the irony is that Jesus' response to Simon Peter was both a diss and a backhanded compliment. Because by saying, flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven, he was inferring that it was certainly not, say, Simon's brilliance that inspired the response. And by calling Simon the son of Jonah, he was drawing an unflattering parallel between Simon and the stubborn and ignorant Jonah, who refused to share God's message of redemption with his Gentile enemies in Nineveh. And so Simon responded to Jesus correctly, despite not having the slightest clue of what calling Jesus the Messiah, the Son of the living God, meant for Jews and Gentiles alike. Which is probably why Jesus, at the end of the passage, says, don't tell anyone I'm the Messiah, because he knows other people aren't going to get it either. Jesus knew the power of names, though. He renamed Simon Peter, the rock. And thereby he expressed confidence that God could use his rough-hewn and even a rough-hewn and ignorant man as a building block. And by so naming him, Jesus opened the door to a new existence for Peter. Peter would still misunderstand what being the Messiah entailed, and he would still jockey for position and honor. And of course, when the going got tough, he would still deny knowing Jesus 3 times. And then he would even run and hide when Jesus was crucified. But Peter could ultimately not escape the power of his name, who God called him to be. And the world will never be the same because of it. And it's no different with us. No matter what our given names, God has a name for us as well. Children of God. We're children of the light. And it's why there is a tradition in many cultures of taking on a new Christian name at our baptism. And by taking on that name and our sense of belonging to the divine family, we are promised that God's life-giving power and love inevitably win out. They can even win out over our ignorance, because God's name is an action verb. True. I am. Remember, God tells Moses from the burning bush that his very name is a conjugation of the verb to be or to become. I am who I am. Or I am becoming who I am becoming. And God named humanity from the beginning of creation. Adam literally means earth or soil. And that earth, God's creation, God called good. And Adam and humanity were good, despite our sin, our fear, and our pathetic attempts to bend creation to our will. So if God can and does redeem even the most perverted and misguided of lives, and the most flawed and regressive of societies, imagine if who you say and who God says that you and others are actually in alignment. How much more effective might we be in realizing the kingdom of God in this world? How much more joy and peace might we enjoy? Some psychologists refer to this struggle to understand our identity in terms of the false self and the true self. We believe in our false self and embrace our false names when we take on all the destructive definitions that we have inherited from our history. And how many of us hang on to something negative that, so say, a parent or a teacher or a schoolmate or even a priest said about us growing up? And haven't those people who try to define us also lived histories of false understandings of who they were and were created to be? And the same thing goes for communities and societies. We can carry with us a national false self and a true self. And they can overlap with our individual identities. But we always have the opportunity and the obligation to re-examine and re-identify and rename ourselves and take on our true self. And we do that when we define ourselves by the future possibilities that are in line with God's will for us. And God's possibilities are always about greater and richer life. Who you are and who am I as a life-enhancing possibility for God's will? Are you the possibility that everyone can realize generosity or see beauty or express love in their lives? I mean, can you create the possibility that all children are safe and fed and comforted? It doesn't mean that you achieve it all yourself. It means you create the possibility, the framework, the attitude that people can be judged by not the color of their skin or their national origin, but by the content of their character. That people can live without fear of exclusion because of how they look or who they love. And instead of calling each other by false names, what if we seek out and and try understanding what each other's real identities are. I mean, looking at Jesus's life and our baptismal covenant, we can find many inspiring ones. We can discover them in unexpected places, foreign and familiar, even in Caesarea Philippi. If we seek and serve Christ in all people and respect the dignity of every human being, we can rename ourselves over and over as God inspires and leads us. And so long as our names and those we give to others are life-giving and life-affirming and life-sustaining, chances are we are living in to who God has called us to be. So go ahead and ask, who do you say that I am? And who do you say that you are? But always remember, the most important question to ask is, who does God call you and me to be? Thanks be to God.